are here, and we're going to try this thing. And I want you to know that we are recording, so we will post this on our YouTube in the coming days, and we will use it from now until the end of time. Either to show how awesome you guys are, or as a lesson of how not to do a virtual panel.
No pressure.
So, but yeah, so before we get started, obviously a little bit of promo work here. Next chapter is next weekend. I graciously appreciate you guys agreeing to do the virtual panel, and you guys have agreed to come next year as well. So awesome. I really appreciate that. That gets us off to a wonderful start for 2021. So why don't we start, and I'm going to start as y'all came into my screen with allowing you to quickly introduce yourself. We will start with Dan, and then Marlena, and then Bobby, and then Armand.
Okay. Well, I'm Dan Jolley. I'm a writer. I started out writing comic books and got into licensed property novels and novelizations, and then original novels, and wandered into the video game industry, and still kind of do all of that stuff, but more original novels than anything else these days.
My name is Marlena Frank, and I'm a young adult fantasy and horror author. I started out doing mostly short stories, mostly horror short stories, and I slowly moved into doing longer pieces, novellas, and then got into novels, and that's kind of my area right now that I'm working with.
Hi, I'm Bobby Nash. I also started writing comics first, and moved from there into novels, short stories. These days, that's mostly what I do is novels and short stories. I occasionally dabble in screenplays, and earlier this year, I wrote my first two straight to audio things, which is pretty cool. So I'm excited to hear how they turn out.
Nice.
Hi, Armand Rosamilia. I am a crime thriller and horror author. I've been doing this for 30 years, even though I look really, really young. And I'm also a podcaster. I own Project Entertainment Network, which is a podcast group with over 30 podcasts right now.
Nice. Okay. So obviously when we put this together, I kind of threw a topic out to you guys, freedom in writing. So when I think of that, I think of a few different aspects of writing. One is the responsibility, juggling that with your other responsibilities that you have in life. I think about the financial aspect because, let's face it, we all want to get paid, right? And then just your time, the time that you spend in writing. And I know that kind of ties in with responsibility, but why don't we go down the list and just kind of find out how you guys kind of juggle some of these different aspects of freedom that writing gives you, but then at the same time, I'm sure it also takes away some freedoms as well. There's some benefits and sacrifices to it all, right? So, Dan?
Well, excuse me. Sort of the way my life is arranged these days, I have kind of an unfair advantage over a whole lot of people because I don't have children. And, the parents in the room can attest to how much time kids take up. So yeah, it's just me and my wife and a handful of useless cats. And, that gives me a huge leg up on the amount of time to spend. And then, as far as like day jobs go, I am a creative executive for a book packager out of the UK called Working Partners, which is just basically more writing. So whether I'm doing my stuff or stuff for the company, I'm just writing constantly, which is what I was going for. So I'm really blessed to have the position that I'm in. So, it's just writing all the time. And I don't know. I have no complaints.
So see, Dan, that's where I want to get to one day. Balancing my, I work as a senior IT member at a university, and balancing that, because that can sometimes be during off hours when I'm needed and things. With trying to write, that's hard to do. I don't have kids to have to worry about, thankfully, to deal with balancing that with everything else. I know people who do, and I just props to them for being able to do that. But it's still hard to balance. This year was my first year that I'm having 2 novels come out, and there's a lot to do. Even though I've got them spaced like 6 months apart, it's still like there's a lot of work that goes into a release, and you're always working to be writing your next novel and be planning out what you're going to be working on next. And it really is like having another job on top of your existing job. For me, since my day job is so very different from what I do with writing, it's shifting my brain over from one side to the next each time I sit down to work with my current work in progress. So that's it's taken me some time to get used to how to do that and be able to do it quickly, and when I have the downtime to do it, taking advantage of that. But I'm getting better at it. It just it's taken me several years to figure that out.
Every non-creative job I've ever had has always just been like what I had to do when I wasn't writing.
Yeah, it's just what do you do,
Yeah, absolutely. I was in the same boat when I had the day job. It was always like, yeah, this will get me through until I can get home to the real job. And but I'm currently I'm writing full time now. The biggest thing that the writing helped me to do was to be flexible, because we had some family issues. Like, I take care of my father at the moment. And before that, I was taking care of my mother and my brother as well. So being flexible in my day to run people here or run people there, or do this or do that, or whatever, kind of non-creative thing has to be done. I can still do that and still work my schedule around it and still get writing done. I'm not at a point where I'm not at the point where there's no complaints. I'd always wish I could make more money, or write a little faster, or those type of things. But yeah, I look at where I was when before my first novel came out, and I look at where I am now. And so on those days where I feel sorry for myself, I kind of look at that and go, there was a moment in time when the biggest goal I had was, I just want someone to publish something. And I'm well beyond that now. So that kind of helps me kind of keep it in focus a little, especially, when we're trapped at home now. It's hard the escape's not there. I'm not going to lunch once or twice a week with friends, or going to the movies to get away from people. And so it's been really good. It's so it gives me freedom to do that. And the other thing that I probably wouldn't do as much if I wasn't writing is travel, because I will talk myself out of taking a trip just to take the trip. But if I can go sell a book, or do a book signing, no problem. Across the country, no problem. I'm on the way. So I've gotten to travel more as a result of doing this. So those are very nice takeaways.
Or book research. That's a good
book.
One.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you can write those off on your taxes.
Exactly. I've been full time for almost 9 years now, and I did retail management for 1,000 years. Hated every second of it. And I just got to a point where I'd actually gotten laid off, and I said, you know what? I have to really get serious about this. I've been writing for a long time at that point, and it just everything aligned, and I was blessed. I got some really good contracts. I wrote for 14 different novelizations of these horrible B movies that had come out, but they paid really, really well. So if anyone has seen, literally it's Navy SEALs versus Zombies. That was one of the titles. I did the book version of that movie. So phenomenal, Academy Award winning movie. But so I'm very lucky that I can do that. I am very creative. When I first met my she's now my wife. When I met her in the end of 2012, she was like, "How many words do you write?" And I'm like, "A lot." And "How much money do you make?" Whatever's in my pocket. And she is a property manager, so she's all spreadsheets and everything else. And she does like the other part of this, the money part, the stuff I don't like to do. And she created spreadsheets and all this stuff that kind of keep me honest. And it's really helped. It's really worked out that I can just be creative, and I do 3 different podcasts. And like I said, I run the podcast company. We're able to travel. We do book signings up and down the East Coast. And, it's a lot of tax write-offs and on all that stuff. And so it's a lot of fun. I used to just do horror books. I was very big into just doing that. And I realized, honestly, that I'd hit a ceiling with sales. And I started branching out. I'd always wanted to do crime thrillers and different things. And when I started doing that, I realized I'm bringing in new readers, but they're also gravitating towards the horror stuff as well. So that was a fun thing. I mean, I've done contemporary fiction. I've done nonfiction. I've done pretty much whatever I feel like doing. And I'm in that great place. Again, I'm blessed that I'm able to do that, and I'm able to pay the bills and do this for a living.
Yeah. Time management and planning is something I learned along the way. Like, I wish I'd have known
Exactly.
some of these things in the beginning. Like, I think in college I would have taken a business class had I have thought about it, because I was very naive. When you're young, you're very naive. I write a story, I give it to somebody, they do all the other stuff. And, that's, for those of us in the room, we know that's not the reality of anything.
I did that into my 40s.
Yeah, so I've had to learn a lot of things because, like Marlena said before, you're doing all these other things. So writing, at the end of the day, even though I'm writing a lot, writing is still just a small portion of our day. We've got to handle things like promotion and marketing and reaching out to book signings. Or right now, like today, I wrote like 5 or 6 different emails about doing virtual events like this one. Things like that, where you're constantly having to get the word out and do all these other things that when you're just writing your book, you don't really think about. But doing this as long as I have now, I've had to learn how to like schedule my day. It's like, I've got to get in this much time on each of these things.
Right. So we do have a question in chat, and would anyone like to comment on their transition into getting published and paid? Why don't this time we start with Marlena?
Okay. So when I first sold an original short story piece, I was amazed because I had been writing like fan fiction stuff for free for years before that. And then I was like, wow, someone actually wants to buy a short story from me that I just, made out of my head. And then, I started writing short stories for a while. And then, I had several books that I had written, but I was having such a hard time trying to find anyone who was able to pick it up because, it's young adult fantasy, but it's not in your typical kind of young adult fantasy genres and things. But I finally found an independent publisher who would do it. And I was so thrilled that they were going to be, and I basically had to find the publisher that matched the book. If that makes sense. Like, I had tried lots of different publishers, but they were like, it's not really our style. And then I found a publisher that really seemed almost perfect fit for the book and the series itself. And once I found that, and I vetted them and I went through the whole process of making sure that they were on the up and up. Once I did that, it was like, oh man, this is amazing. So that was kind of my journey with that. And I'm still working with them for not just that series, but for other books as well. So it was great.
Okay. And let's go to Bobby.
Oh, and there's a big difference too. Published and paid were not the same project.
Very different.
Yeah. I did some comics for a small publisher that, in the early days that, yeah, if I'd held my breath waiting on any money, I'd still be holding my breath, that kind of thing. But I did stuff like that earlier on just to get stuff, have stuff to show. So I did some things earlier that I knew if I ever saw a dime on it, I would be surprised. But once I started getting paid, that was around the time of the first novel was when money started coming in. And so, which was a great eye opener. It's like, wait, if I stop doing all this stuff for people I know aren't going to pay me, I might actually be able to pay a bill or two with this. And so at that point, you kind of start focusing on, which publishers you're going to use, what kind of stuff you're going to do. You have to learn how to say no. That was a biggie for me, was learning how to say no to projects. Because, there was a time, like I said, all I wanted was to be published. So it was hard to say no to somebody who says, would you like to write a story for us? And I've learned how to do that, which has helped a lot. And just focusing on, where I want the career to go, setting goals that I can try to meet. And it's not always easy, and sometimes the goals move, but I do try to angle for, and they're not outlandish goals. It's not like one big goal. There's a lot of little goals to meet, that are achievable. So you still feel you're accomplishing things. And so I found that doing that has helped me quite a long ways to keep doing where I'm getting paid work and, getting the work out there. So, so the first paid thing was my first novel was Evil Ways, which came out in 2005. And before that, I had done a few comics where I got a little money here and there, but the first real kind of payment was in 2005.
Okay, so let's go to Armand, but we're going to go to you with a different question. When you were younger, and Dan, this will come to you after that. When you were younger, did you promote like crazy a product that really wasn't good? If so, what can you say to authors that need honest evaluation? Man, Mark's really giving it to you guys.
It's a great question. I want to say I was lucky because I started selling stories in basically as a senior in high school to zines, and anybody who's younger than me, look that up. And so all through my 20s, I sold a lot of really, really awful stories that had no business being published, and they were on these little side-stapled Xeroxed, some 14-year-old kid did in his basement. And looking back now, and I look at all of the names that were also in those zines and how their stories probably shouldn't have been published either. So it was a great time because I cut my teeth doing that. And I wrote that mythical first million words that was garbage, and it helped me as an author. Now today, the problem is you can write something today. You can write your first story and immediately put it up on Amazon. And as an author, you think it's the greatest thing because you want your work to be thought of as great. And I think it's sometimes it's a bad thing. I think a lot of authors think, okay, I'm immediately going to go out, I'm going to get published. And that's kind of where you want to be. And obviously that's a bucket list to get paid. It's a bucket list, even if it's something free that you're putting out, your buddy's putting out an anthology or has a web zine or whatever. But you just need to keep writing. And for young authors, I tell them all the time, write a lot of stuff and maybe put it away. Maybe put it off to the side. Maybe really work at your craft first. Find your voice. And that's a big thing because unfortunately this stuff is going to be out there, and hopefully you get better. We all want to get better, but you don't want to start from zero. I think I started from about a 6, and I've worked my way up to like a 7.5 or an 8 in my writing. I at 17, 18, I was a -5, and those stories were god awful. And I'm so glad that nobody, there's that fear as an author that you're going to be sitting in a book signing and somebody's going to bring this thing that you wrote at 22, this zine, and go, here, could you sign this for me? And I'm going to go, give me a lighter, let me burn this thing. I mean, those are some awful stories, And I think as a writer, you just need to keep writing, and you just need to get better and get better. And maybe, and if you're a young author today, maybe don't always go public right away. And I mean, that's, I'm an old man, so I can say that.
Well, plus with writing those awful stories though, help you get better.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you don't put them out, it's still we still learn a lot from writing those bad stories. We realize what didn't work, or especially like me, the first few things I wrote, I realized who I was copying.
Well, right.
And-
You're trying to find your voice. I mean, I wrote tons of Dean Koontz awful short stories that went nowhere because that's what I read. That's what I read growing up. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, I wrote a ton of really bad Stephen King stories," or whoever you grew up reading, and that's just normal. You just don't want to put those. You just don't want to put those out in the public until you've had a chance to really work
I put those out in the public.
them. You're the guy.
I didn't get started quite as early as you did, Armand, but I was 19 when I signed my first contract. And I had just lucked into meeting some comic book artists. And so they decided that they thought I didn't walk on my knuckles, and introduced me to some editors. And so the first stories that I had published were by mainstream comic book companies. I mean, some of the smaller ones, Harris Comics. My first ever sale was a Vampirella script. Top-notch work. And went from there to Dark Horse, and I started at 19, but I didn't write a word worth reading until I was 25, at least, maybe 30. But yeah, people come to my table at shows with copies of some early stuff sometimes, and sometimes they're like, "Oh, I loved this story so much," and I'm thinking, why? But thank you. Here, sure, I'll sign that.
Still looking for one of your Vampirellas so you can sign it. Just
you don't have
so you know.
Just do it.
Well, you don't have to, the second. I did two, and they were years apart. The second one was better, but to get to the question, and I love having the Zoom chat over here so I can see the question, because I always forget what the question is. But did you promote like crazy when you were younger? And no, I didn't, because since I was working for these well-established companies, they had marketing departments. Now, some of the marketing departments didn't do very much. And that was true once I got into writing for DC. They picked the projects that they were going to promote, and then others they just didn't. But they did not want me to be out there muddying the waters with my own attempts at publicity. They were like, "We'll handle this." And so, I've only started getting into writing truly original, truly just for me, original novels in the last few years. So I'm still on the far left end of the learning curve as far as how to promote properly. So I could learn a lot from you guys as far as that goes.
And I can attest that Dan has told me on multiple occasions that he is the world's worst at promoting himself.
Yeah.
So, matter of fact, you stick him next to David Joel, and Dan is very unhappy with himself. So
I pretty much learned how to promote on the fly. Actually, it was another writer I met who told me, it's like, if you don't promote your own stuff, because you have to ask yourself this question: who cares more about your book than you? And that was kind of an eye opener, because I had never thought of it that way. I just thought these companies have departments that do that stuff, and they're like, yeah, but they're not. You're not famous enough for them to spend a lot of time on. And it was quite an eye opener. So I started learning, and all of my promotional skills are self-taught, or things I've learned on the fly. But yeah, you can learn a lot by seeing how other people do it, which is really how I started. Why I watched, certainly with the internet now, it's even easier to see how other people do it, because everything is either photographed or videoed, and so I picked up a lot. I picked up a lot of tricks from watching other people and stole them and adapted them to my books.
It's a lot of trial and error too with marketing.
Yes.
And you'll try something out and you'll be like, this isn't working. And like with mailing lists and things like that, it's taken me doing a lot of research to figure out how to do it properly. Reading, different books from experts who do it, and I've gotten better at it over time. But you have to be willing to experiment and try it and fail at it before you can actually move forward with it. And I think that's one of the hardest things with being an author is not just writing the book, but being able to get the word out there about your books, and having people willing to try it out. That's really a difficult step.
Writing the book is the easy part.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're also, I mean, you're not just, at the end of the day, too, we're not just selling our books. I mean, part of it, we're selling ourselves. We're selling the image of who we are and how we are, and that some people will, I've had people come to me at cons and say, I see you at these all the time. You seem like a nice guy. Let me buy one of your books. It doesn't sound like they care about the book at all. They just want, so, but there is something to that of the personality you put out there that helps.
You're kind of making connections all the time with people, whether it's people face to face at conventions, which I find to be one of the best ways to get out there and see people. Obviously, not so much right now, but especially with like Next Chapter Con and stuff like that coming up next week. But that's like the best way, in my opinion, to get out there and see people face to face, and to make connections with people, either via email or whatever, but that's, in my opinion, the best way to do it.
I agree.
Yeah. When you put that personal touch on it, people aren't just buying the book anymore. They're buying you, right? So, and I've seen that so many times. People will stop because the book looks interesting, or something about your setup has caught their attention. But I have seen them have a 30-second conversation with an author and then turn their nose up and walk away. And I've seen them have a 5-minute conversation with an author and then they walk away with, 3, 4, a bag full, and it's at that point, it's not because of the book solely. It's because they connected with that author on a personal level, right?
Yep.
And the opposite is true too. I've met some authors who were not nice. We had bad, and it colors my view of their work.
Yeah.
And I've been to shows before where I'll be like really interested in the books, but the author who's there just is like, I don't care about you.
Yeah.
And it's like that colors your perspective as a reader too. You're like, I don't know, if you're not going to engage with me or tell me about your books or anything, so you really, that kind of persona is important.
Yeah. Well, and also the other works as well. Like I've met authors at cons who I've read their stuff, and it's okay, but I was just, I could take it or leave it. But after meeting them and having good experience meeting them, it elevates the work in my view as well. So so there's a lot to that. Yeah.
Okay.
I got sort of a lesson in how not to do it. I don't want to name names, but there's a famous makeup artist, like Hollywood makeup artist. And I saw him at a Dragon Con years ago, and there wasn't anybody at his table. And I walked up and he was just leaned back in his chair and he was just glaring at me, just giving me the stink eye. And I said, hey, it's really nice to meet you, sir. Yeah, I'm amazed at your work in movies. And he just glared at me. And I said, I read the book that you wrote. More glare. And I said, unless you've written more than one. And he went, and then I walked away. I mean, it was like really cold in the room at that point. And you're right. That, now his special effects don't even look as good.
Yeah.
Right.
That whole experience has like changed your perspective on all of his work, and that's like, you gave him a chance, That's how that goes, though. It starts to color the work in either positive or negative light, depending on that first impression.
In fact, that's a lesson that one of the comic book artists that I first met told me when I was first starting out, that if you're at a con and you're nice to someone who comes to your table, they might buy something from you. They might tell the people that they came to the con with. That's about it. If you're a jerk to them, they will tell everyone they've ever
Yes.
met from then until the end of time.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, when I started doing cons, I started watching the other guests and seeing how they did things and picking a few to mimic. Like, I will name names because this is a good one. But the first like comic book celebrity that I ever really noticed at a con that just jumped out to me was George Perez. And watching how George treats everyone who stops at his table like they are the most important person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna be like somebody, that's who I want to emulate. And so, yeah, you can learn a lot by watching some of these people and how they do things.
Yeah. You know, I once at a convention had some people come back that had seen me at the same convention the year before, and came to find out that she had since moved from Knoxville, Tennessee to Ohio, and drove all the way back to Ohio for this convention. And I said, well, who are you here to see? Of course, there was a litany of celebrities. It was fanboy around the outside wall. She said, oh, well, we drove down here to come see you. And that, again, that wasn't because I was an awesome writer, because my stuff, if you've read it, especially the early stuff before I re-edited it, it had some issues, right? So, but that was because that we had connected, you know, and this time she brought back her fiance and her sister, and that's what you want. That's why you do those type events, right?
Yeah, some of the best convention experiences for me, buy stuff from the table. That's awesome. Love it. When people took the effort to pack something, get on an airplane with it, fly to the convention, carry it around all day to come get you to sign it.
Yeah.
That makes you feel really good.
Yeah.
I can't say that. It hasn't happened to me yet.
Me neither, Kenny. Don't worry.
It'll get there, but you never know when it'll happen. It's you know, we were at a small con here in Atlanta, and I'd met some people. I used to co-host a podcast, and we had met some folks who lived over in the UK. And once a year, him and his wife come to the States. And so this year they decided they were going to come for this convention, and that way we could all meet, and because all of us were going to be there. And he shows up with a stack of books that he flew over, from the UK to get signed. And I was like, wow, because it's not cheap to put luggage on, to bring luggage. Did all that was just, it was just, it gets you right here. And yeah, that's awesome.
So we've got one more question from Mark. Can you think of a passage by another author that you think is the greatest thing ever and a model for yourself? Who and what passage?
I got one.
Okay.
The greatest opening line that I've ever read is from the Robert McCammon novel Gone South. And that opening line is, "It was hell's season and the air smelled of burning children."
Oof.
And I read that and I was like, whoa, I'm reading this book. Yep. Making my way to the checkout right now. And he was talking about a guy in southern Alabama driving down a road with a bunch of restaurants, and there were several barbecue restaurants. And he had experiences in Vietnam with napalmed villages and such, and knew that human flesh, when it's burned, smells like pork. And so that memory just put him right back in the war. But, you have to read a little farther on to find that out. And it's just that first line. I've tried to make every opening line that arresting ever since then.
That's a good line.
Mm-hmm. It's good. It just ruined the barbecue for me.
Long pig. That's human flesh.
Yeah, I can't think of a specific line or passage off the top of my head, but I am quite often more impressed, or I learn from how other writers do characters. how they introduce characters or character traits. Because the more interesting ones are the ones where the character peels away like an onion, as opposed to the narrator going, he stood 5'6" and weighed this, and where details come out as you get to know the character and the character becomes real for you. And so things like that tend to get me. And so, guys like Elmore Leonard or Michael Connolly who are writing these characters that are at one point larger than life, but at another point very human, and seeing how they kind of get those character details out to me as the reader is something that I try to emulate that style, as opposed to the big info dump about characters.
Yeah. For me, it's more, it's not necessarily passages. It's sometimes I'll read a book and, like I just read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And by the end of that book, I literally put it down. I said to my wife, I don't want to be a writer anymore, because he's just so damn good at what he does. And when you start the book, you're like, what's really going on? Not only the characters and the plot, but the way he's writing. It's kind of all kind of jumbled together. But then once you get the flow of it, you're like, this is brilliant. This is a phenomenal book. And you're like, I'm never going to be able to emulate this. I'm never going to be able to write something like this. It's frustrating as an author. And I consider myself more of a pulp fiction author. I just want to write a good story. I don't need to be fancy. I don't need to check every word. I don't need all that. I just want to write. I mean, I write a lot of words every year. I write a ton of books every year. And for me, it's more of, at the end of the day, will somebody read that book and go, hey, that was pretty good, and then hopefully move on to one of my other books. But every now and then you get that one book you read and you're like, it just blows you away because everything about it is perfect.
I totally agree with you, Armand. I read The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle, and I ended up highlighting most of that book because I ended up having to close it on pages and be like, this is too beautiful. I can't possibly ever write anything close to as visually descriptive and perfect as this is, and then I'd have to come back, but yeah, I feel you on that feeling of like when you read a book and you can tell, like when he wrote it, that he locked himself in a cabin in the woods for like weeks and just wrote on the book, because it really comes out in the writing, and it's just like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, so I'll chime in on this one too. When I was younger, I loved Shakespeare. I'm probably the only kid I've ever met that loved Shakespeare, right? I bought not just Shakespeare books, but I bought books about Shakespeare books, right? That helped explain some of the things that we might not understand today. And one of the things that stuck out to me was that how in his plays, it's usually the fool, the character that should be the blathering idiot, right? Who is the only one that understands what's going on. He's making fun of all these aristocrats. He's making fun of all these other things in the stories that he's writing and showing just how vulnerable they are. And yet here's this guy who nobody pays any attention to because he's supposed to be the town idiot or whatever. And he sees everything, right? And so one of the lines from one of his stories is Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And he simply says, Lord, what fools these mortals be. And to me, that's brilliant, because it perfectly sums up everything that's going on in that story at that time with the sentence, and then how he's so eloquently able to, he does two things depending on the stories. He either shows you everything that's going to happen, and then the whole time you're reading it going, okay, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And then it happens and you're like, oh, wow, he did it. It really did happen. Or the opposite, you're seeing everything going along and he's dropping tidbits. And then when it happens, you're like, I never saw it coming. It's just really, it's writing on another level. And then he takes all this beautiful language and wraps it up in a nice, pretty bow that we sometimes don't get anymore, And John Donne, he wrote one of my favorite poems ever, which was The Flea, where basically, if you've ever read it, he's wooing this girl by using a flea. She has smushed a flea with her finger, and he's convincing her to have sex with him because that flea bit him and then it bit her. And so it was like their baby because it had their blood in it. And since she killed it, Now they need to go consummate a real child. And it's just brilliant, and it's a flea, and it's actually, when you're reading it, you're like, he's totally pulling this thing off. You know, you're like, I'm jealous because I can't write like that. Anyways, so we are about out of time. I got a message from Zoom. They graciously gave us a few more minutes. I don't know why, but they did. So any quick words on some works in progress? We'll just go in whatever order, whoever speaks first.
Well, next month is kind of a big month for me. 4 novels that I had previously had come out from one press are being reissued by my new publisher, Falstaff Books. On October 1st, The Storm will be available, and on October 15th, all 3 books in my Grey Widow trilogy are going to be available. And then sandwiched in between those, on October 6th, a graphic novel for kids that I did is coming out called Mega Dogs of New Kansas. Because aside from the horror-edged, incredibly bloody, violent, profane, sexual science fiction stuff, I write for kids too. And then as far as works in progress, next year from Falstaff, I've got a new series coming out called the Demon Sleuth Scrolls, which is going to be kind of like Game of Thrones meets True Detective.
Very nice. I will say, The Storm is awesome. I love that. That's a very good book. Very good book. I'm working on several things through my imprint, my self-publishing imprint, Ben Books. I do a lot of novellas and release these novellas that we can release on a series and then collect into larger trades. So my snow books, as you can see over, yeah, it's hard to do this backwards, but my snow books, I have the 6th book in the first series. Book 6 will be out before the end of the year. I just started a new series with the sheriff character who first appeared in my first novel, Evil Ways, is getting his own series of novellas. Plus, I'm doing several other things. I'm doing a 4-book series from Falstaff Books called Hunter Houston Horror Hunter. It's a horror comedy series that's set in the John's fairly popular Bubba the Monster Hunter series. It's a spinoff of that. And then I've got several short things sprinkled throughout, the year to get finished. So I'm not sure when they'll come out. I have like 3 Domino Lady projects that are in, we're just waiting on the publisher. So just more of a lot of stuff coming.
Well, I've got a young adult horror novel called The Seeking coming out October 27th. I don't have copies yet, but you get a lovely magnet. But that's a mixture of A Quiet Place and Hunger Games, set in a dystopian world with lots of monsters. That comes out October 27th, and then the 3rd book in the Stolen trilogy comes out March 23rd. That's going to be Chosen, which is the final book in the trilogy there. So that's what I'm working on currently.
I just had a book came out a couple days ago from Severed Press called The Sea Was Angry. And it is basically it's the sea life killing everybody off of Daytona Beach. And I'm working on my crime thriller Dirty Deeds 9. That'll be out by the end of this year. I have my first short story collection in about 7 years coming out called Make Pretend. That'll come out in November on my birthday, November 21st. Everybody feel free to buy me something and maybe buy my book. And
we'll buy your book for your birthday.
There you go. That's a great birthday present. And I think I have, at last count, I think I have 8 anthologies upcoming through October, November into December that I'm in. So I wrote a ton of short stories in the beginning of this year and sold all of them, but just kind of waiting for all those books now to drop. Of course, a lot of those stories are horror, so it's like everybody wants to release around Halloween, which kills you because I think I have four anthologies are coming out within like 3 days at that point. So it's like, how do you promote that?
That would be a nice problem to have. Just,
Yeah, but I guess I shouldn't complain.
all right. Well, I thank everybody for participating. As soon as I have this ready and up on YouTube, I will make sure to send everybody links so that y'all can do with it what you want. And then I'll send a follow-up on next chapter, just to let you guys know how it went. And I'll be the first to let you, y'all be the first to know that next year we are going to be moving to a new, bigger location.
Ooh,
So,
nice.
exciting.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. It will probably be a little longer. For those of you that were there last year, I think 3 of you were there last year. It's kind of a short day as far as cons go. So we're moving into a location that gives us pretty much the whole day, and it's going to be nicer. So,
Can you say what this new location is?
the Dalton Trade Center.
Okay.
Oh,
So they've got a ballroom down there, and we're going to be in the ballroom, which is larger than what we've been doing, and it's a really nice facility. So it's right off the interstate, easier to find too than going through back roads down in Ringgold to get to what's a nice facility. It's just not easy to get to right now, so it'll be much easier next year. So
Looking forward to it.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I had a ball last year, so yeah, I'm excited to come back next year. So
Yeah.
good. So, well, I appreciate it, and you guys have a great night, and
Thanks for
we'll talk to
having
y'all
us.
soon.
It's it.
night.
Bye.
Everybody.